Board meeting. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. The first thing on our agenda is to take action on all consent agenda items. So if you're here to speak about anything on the agenda that's indicated with an asterisk, please fill out one of these blue cards right away and bring it up to staff. We do have a handful, but it looks like they are all related to item 7A, which is already off of the consent agenda. So give us just 1 minute. We'll see what these blue cards are for. Let's see. Hold on just a second.
That one's already off. It's the Mesa Royale.
Okay. Yeah.
So 4B is just these two. Huh?
Yeah. Okay. That's good. I'll put that over here. Okay. All right. So just so everybody knows that we have pulled off a few items on the consent from our study session. It's item 4B, 5B, and 5E. All right, so would like to have Board Member Crockett please read the consent agenda into the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the consent agenda will consist of the following items. Agenda item 2A, the minutes from the August 14, 2018 and August 15, 2018 study sessions and regular hearing. Agenda item 3A, case ZON 17-00597, District 2, 1961 South Val Vista Drive, located on the northeast corner of Val Vista Drive and Baseline Road, site plan modification. This request will allow a multi-tenant commercial building with a drive-through. This request has been tabled by the applicant, so it won't be voted on today. Agenda item 3B has been continued to October 17, 2018 board meeting, but I'll read it anyway. It's case ZON 18-00454, District 3. The 1200 block of South Country Club Drive, west side, located on the west side of Country Club Drive, south of Southern Avenue, a site plan review. This request will allow for the development of a restaurant with a drive-through. And again, that's continued to the October 17, 2018 P&Z board meeting. Agenda item 3C, case ZON 18-00362, District 6, within the 6400 and 6500 blocks of South Mountain Road, located on the west side of South Mountain Road and north of Pecos Road. This is a site plan modification and a special use permit for a parking reduction. This request will allow for the expansion of an existing industrial facility. Agenda item 3D is case ZON 18-00441, District 6.
For just a second, maybe I missed it, but on the last agenda item, 3C, did you say staff recommendation approval for with conditions?
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Wesley. The staff recommendation there is for approval with conditions. Again, to agenda item 3D, ZON 18-00441, District 6, within the 3800 block of South Sossaman Road, located south of Elliott Road on the east side of Sossaman Road, a site plan review. This request will allow for the development of an RV and boat storage facility. The staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Agenda item 3E, case ZON 18-00469, District 2, 6758 East University Drive, located on the northwest corner of University Drive and Power Road, a site plan modification. This request will allow for the development of a restaurant with a drive-through. The staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Agenda item 3F, case ZON 18-00508 in District 5, the 5800 block of East Longbow Parkway, located north of McDowell Road and west of Wrecker Road, a site plan review. This request will allow for the development of an indoor commercial recreation facility. The staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Agenda item 4A is case ZON 18-00361 in District 4, 244 North Extension Road, located east of Alma School Road, south of University Drive. Council use permit for social service facility and special use permit for a parking reduction for a substance abuse social service facility. This request will allow an inpatient substance abuse treatment facility. This item has been continued to the October 17, 2018 meeting by the request of the applicant. Agenda item 4B has been, that one that we've pulled, that one has been pulled and will be heard on the regular agenda. Agenda item 4C, case ZON 18-00470 in District 6, the 200 block of North Signal Butte Road and the 10800 block of East Mercury Drive, located south of University Drive on the east side of Signal Butte Road. This is a rezoning from RS9 to RSL 2.5 PAD and a site plan review. This request will allow for the development of a single residence subdivision. The staff recommendation on this item is approval with conditions. Agenda item 4D is case ZON 18-00510 in District 6, within the 1700 and 1800 blocks of South Crisman Road, located west of Crisman Road, north of Baseline Road, rezoning to amend existing conditions of approval, a site plan modification, and a special use permit for assisted living. This request will allow for the development of a continuum care facility. The staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Agenda item 5A is PZ 18138, Longbow Marketplace Phase 2 in District 5. The 5800 block of East Longbow Parkway, located north of McDowell Road and west of Wrecker Road. This is a preliminary plat approval. The staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item 4B will be pulled from the consent agenda and heard on the regular agenda. Agenda item 5C is PZ 18139, Monte Lucia in District 6, the 200 block of North Signal Butte Road, and the 10,800 block of East Mercury Drive, located south of University Drive on the east side of Signal Butte Road. This is a preliminary plat for approval. The staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Agenda item 5D, PZ 18150, Three Fountains Senior Living Facility in District 6, within the 1700 and 1800 blocks of South Crisman Road, located west of Crisman Road, north of Baseline Road. This is a preliminary plat. The staff recommendation is approval with conditions. Item 5E is pulled and will be heard on the regular agenda. Item 5F is PZ 18146, Mesa German Business Park in District 6, the 7200 through the 7600 blocks of South Ellsworth Road, located south of Pecos Road and north of German Road on the west side of Ellsworth Road. This is a preliminary plat. The recommendation by staff is approval with conditions, and I believe that's everything on the consent agenda.
Madam Chair, if I may, just one thing, just to make sure it was clear, on item 5B, the plat for Mesa Royale, might have actually said 4B instead of 5B, so just make sure that's clear on the record that that was 5B, Mesa Royale plat being pulled.
5B?
5B.
Is pulled. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Yeah, I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor or not, please vote. Okay, it's unanimous approval of the consent agenda, and Jessica Sarkisian, I should say, is excused today. She won't be joining us, so thank you. That's it for the consent agenda. We'll move on to the regular agenda. Mr. Wesley, we can go ahead and just combine items 4B and 5B together, right? Okay, thank you. Okay, so item 4B is case ZON 18-00446 in District 4, within the 600 block of West Pepper Place and the 0 block of North Date, located north of Main Street and west of Country Club on about 3.5 acres, sorry. This is a request for a rezoning for RM-2 to RM-3 PAD and a site plan review to allow for the development of an attached single residence subdivision, and 5B is the related preliminary plat. Mr. Wesley or Leslie, would you like to give us a presentation? I'm sorry, Lisa.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair, members of the board. I'll just give a brief overview of the request. It is a request for rezoning of 3.5 acres for redevelopment with a site plan and a preliminary plat. It's generally located north of Main Street and west of Country Club. And it would allow for 15 buildings that are a combination of 2- and 3-story buildings, with a total of 56 units, residential units. The applicant has provided a citizen participation report. They have had a neighborhood meeting where they had about 30 people show up that did talk about the project, that's a great turnout to hear that so many neighbors are involved there. Staff has also had some emails, as well as the applicant emails from neighbors asking questions of the project coming forward. I believe that you're going to be hearing from one of the neighbors in the area, and staff has been responding to those emails. In general, looking at the general plan for this, it is consistent with the general plan. It is within the sub-area plans of the West Main Plan, as well as the Central Main Street Area Plan. And both of those plans have policies that encourage the transit-oriented development, the TOD, things such as moving the buildings closer to the street, higher density development, reducing some of those setbacks, and also more than 2 stories in height. There are modifications from development standards that are requested with this, including a reduction of setbacks, 15 feet to the north property line, 30 feet is required by ordinance requirements, and they're requesting 15 feet. They're also asking for a reduction of the setback adjacent to the street. It'll be 5 feet from the Pepper Street as well as Date. They are bringing forward the 2-story element that we talked about on the north side of Pepper. Excuse me, and the 3 stories will be on the south side, so a more dense project at the south side of the site. The crime prevention officer has been involved and looked at the overall site plan and provided some feedback on that, and the applicant is willing to incorporate some of those changes as well, which includes the elimination of those hammerhead parking spaces and turnarounds at the end of those private drives that access those garages. With that, staff is recommending approval of the case with the conditions in the report. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Lisa, I appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions for staff? No? Yes, we do have 2 people who will be speaking on this. Okay. Well, thank you for now, Lisa. Would the applicant like to give a presentation?
Lindsay Shuby with the law firm of Gamage and Burnham, 2 North Central in Phoenix, Arizona. I left here yesterday thinking I was going to be on consent, but we always have a presentation. I will try to make it quick, though, because I do know you have other items on your agenda tonight that we're not on consent that you guys are going to talk about. So are we up? Perfect. Mesa Royale. We are here tonight for a rezone, site plan, and preliminary plat as described by Lisa. A wee bit about Chicanas per La Casa. I think everyone here knows CPLC. I have representatives of CPLC if there are any questions that you have of me that I can't answer. But just a wee bit about them. CPLC is the 4th largest nonprofit in Arizona. And they're the largest community development corporation in the Southwest. They deliver a number of services, including economic development, housing, education, and integrated health and human services. In the past 6 years, CPLC has specifically touched 1.4 million lives. They own and operate over 3,471 multifamily units, ranging, and I think this is an important note too, ranging market rate units to workforce housing in 3 different states, Arizona, New Mexico, and Nevada. And since 1995, CPLC has developed over 500 single-family homes for sale. And this project that we're talking about tonight is an entirely for-sale project. There's no rentals as part of this. Where are we speaking about? I think you all know, but generally speaking, we're just north of the light rail, north of Main Street. As you get closer in, we are in between Date and Extension, north of Main. One important thing, I was here yesterday in the study session and I heard the comments on design, and we're going to get to that. But just while we're looking at this exhibit specifically, one thing when speaking to the design of this project as compared to others along Main Street, this is along Pepper. So while we think of it as a TOD and all that elements of kind of transect zoning, pushing the buildings closer to the street, it is important to note that we are surrounded by single-family residences. And so in terms of our design, and I heard everything and took notes feverishly, and we will talk about that with the design review committee, so don't worry, between John and I, we'll make sure that all the notes are taken. But it's a bit of a different design than if you were right on Main Street. So that's just one thing that we factored in when we were designing it. Mesa Royale specifically, this is what it looks like. We've got buildings both on north and south side of Pepper. Specifically, again, as we discussed, a rezone is what we're asking for, RM2 to RM3 with a PAD to permit 56 market rate for sale attached single-family units. Say that 6 times fast. Preliminary site plan approval. We're going to develop this in 3 phases, and then also preliminary plat approval. That's item 5B. Generally, this is what it looks like. When you think about that other exhibit I showed you, you have Main Street and you have that kind of commercial zoning just north of Main Street. We transition our height. When you're closer to the commercial development, we have a 3-story product. As you get closer to the single-family residence, it is a 2-story product. Again, 3.5 acres. We have 15 buildings. The mix of 2 to 3-story, again, the 3-story kind of buffering that density from the commercial to the residential. 3 to 5 units per building, and again, constructed in 3 phases. This is an example of the 2-story residence. Again, that's on the north side of Pepper. And then there are 29 3-story residences. Those are on the south side of Pepper and back up to the commercial development on Main Street. We conform with the general plan and the sub-area plans. I can take you through all these, but I know you've got a busy agenda tonight. The specifics of the rezone, again, RM3 with the planned area development, we touched on the deviations that we're looking for, but again, the deviations we're looking for is to be consistent with this TOD development that you want closer to the light rail, the reduced perimeter setbacks, reduced building separation, and then reduced landscape materials. Again, 56 for sale market rate units. I think that's an important part of this application. We have enhanced streetscapes. We're also doing some interesting things in terms of trash pulls and reserved parking spot, not reserved parking spots, that's a bad, but dedicated parking spots on the street. Those can't be counted towards our parking. The street parking doesn't count. But we did some interesting work with this infill development with the engineering department to make sure we did have some dedicated street parking, and which was especially important. We did that at the beginning before we even took out the hammerheads, but now that we made that modification as a response to the police department, I think that's even more important that we did all that work at the beginning. Active street frontages, all the units have porches, and so activate, again, that street frontage and hopefully the connectivity between the neighbors. Purpose of the redevelopment is we know this is an infill project. The current condition we're looking to improve. We're dealing with a site that's relatively small, 3.5 acres, and these new products I think are going to be a real nice addition to West Mesa and really, a really wonderful redevelopment of the West Mesa area. Support light rail, increase home ownership opportunities, and a nice transition from the commercial to the low-density residential. Again, I'm here respectfully requesting approval of those 3 things. Staff has recommended approval with conditions, and we are supportive of all the conditions as drafted. We have next steps. I heard you loud and clear. We will look at the design. We will try to add more spice. I heard tonight less less suburban, less another jurisdiction that actually I won't say on. But we will try to make it look more interesting. I've heard that. We'll also have subdivision technical review and final plat to make sure that all of our engineering standards are met. And with that, I'll answer any questions. I know there is someone from the public who wants to speak, so I'll be available for now for questions or after.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant right now? No? Okay, well, we might call you back up.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and open it up to the public. We have 2 comment cards. One is Larry Wheat, and it's not indicated if you're in favor or opposed, if you want to speak or do not, but would you like to? Okay. If you'd state your name and address for us when you get to the podium, and we've got a 3-minute allotment per speaker. And we'll go ahead and start the timer when you're ready, and when we get a little bit close, I might flag you down.
My name is Larry Wheat, and my property is at 601 West First Street. My only concern is that I've tried to create privacy in my backyard. My property is on the corner of Date and First Street, and along Date Street, I went ahead and put a 6-foot block wall. So I have quite a bit of privacy back there. And my concern is that a 2-story building looks right down into the backyard, and once my privacy is gone in my backyard, it's gone. I have it right now, but I'm afraid I'm going to lose it. And I understand that there was no adjustments made, and the windows still look down in my backyard, and that's my main concern. I mean, along Date Street right now, there's a lot of parking. Now, the trailer park looks like it's about 50% occupied, but it's still bumper to bumper from Extension to Date Street on Pepper. So there's a lot of parking there, and I'm hoping it goes away. I think you said you had enough parking, but I have a feeling all the garages are going to be full of couches, and it's still going to be the same parking. So those are my main concerns.
Thank you very much. Did anyone have any questions for Mr. Wheat? Okay, thank you. We also have a card from Deborah Wheat. You've indicated you're opposed to the item.
Hi, sorry I sat in the back, but I didn't want to cough on everybody. I got a terrible cold. I'm Deborah Wheat, and my address is the property at 601 West Date Street. Like my husband said, we live at the corner of Date and First Street, and he has put a lot of work into making our backyard look very nice. It's like a little garden for people when you're back there, and we do tend to be outdoor people. I have written to the city planning and zoning and requested that the windows on the back side of the units be removed. There's other properties, the Main Street Station, if you go visit that area, none of the buildings that back to the existing properties have any windows on the back side. So I mean, as far as like down on the ground level, as long as it's below the block wall, I have no problem with windows. But we would really like to not have the windows overlooking our property because it does take away from our privacy back there. And our lots are, you know, they're bigger, you know, and the new development doesn't really have their own personal little backyards. They're all going to be sharing with everybody else. So we just don't want to have to be able to give up our privacy and what we've worked for so hard in an older area. The house was built like in 1940-something. Cute as a button. It's got all the old architectural style stuff. That's why we like it. So I'm not against it, but I'm against it if it has all the windows overlooking our property. And I know I've talked to Lisa, and she said, well, there's a staircase, but there's windows on the other side of the staircase. There's 3 windows on that side, 1 window on our side. I don't know why the window has to be on our side. And even the one where there's I forgot, it's like a rec room or something like that, a little area, study area. You know, if they need a window, why don't they just put a little window up at the top if they want light? They don't have to have a big window that overlooks our backyard. So, I mean, we're just used to our privacy. We like our backyard. And we really don't want people looking over, watching what we're doing in our backyard.
And I was just trying to remember, you've got your, I'm trying to figure out where you are in relation to the property. And tell me again where your property is. It's on the corner of
Date and First Street?
First.
Yeah, we back right up to the first building that'll be on Pepper.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Mrs. Wheat right now? Okay.
No?
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
Okay, so we don't have any more cards, so we'll close the public comment section and we'll just discuss it as the board here. Does anyone have any comments or want to start or have questions for staff? Or actually, would you like to come up first? I'm sorry, I'm just switch the order just a little bit to give you a chance to respond to the neighbors. Sorry about that.
Madam Chair, Planning Commission, I think staff and I can both answer. The Wheats did send a couple emails, and they had some great suggestions. Interestingly, they recommended the parking spots be removed, the same as the police department did. So that, I think that was a really good suggestion in terms of privacy and noise. As far as the windows, they are in the stairwell and kind of in a loft area. We can absolutely look at kind of there are no windows out of a bedroom or anything like that where you look out of on a regular basis. The windows, though, are important twofold. A, for safety, just being able to see the surroundings. We want to make sure that there is visibility around and you can kind of see what's happening in the development. And also just for natural light. I think we all need natural light and vitamin D. And, so we want to make sure that we're not creating dark. These units are pretty big. They're 1,800 square feet, 1,900 square feet. But we want to make sure there's enough light in there. So we can absolutely work through the design review process to ensure that there's light, but trying to be respectful of privacy. But they're not coming out of a window or there's no porch, looking out into their backyard or anything like that. So they are in a stairwell and then in a loft area.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So, I'm sorry, before you leave.
Yes.
Would anyone like to ask the applicant any questions?
Yeah, I just, would the owner be willing to work with the Wheat family in regards to maybe an obscure type piece of glass that would allow for all of the natural light to occur with no direct visual communication to their backyard and their private space? Just thinking of, from a compromise standpoint, it would probably help them a lot. If we're not talking about safety and the requirement of egress out of these windows, it might be an easy way to allow them, some comfort in that regard, in that one unit.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, yes, we absolutely are. We're again, they're not in livable area. Well, the loft area is, but not in a way that, people will sit there and constantly look out the window. But yes, we will look at either the placement of the windows or
Kind of a translucent option that's
Mm-hmm.
not fully transparent, something like that.
Yeah, we are, yes.
Doesn't need to go away necessarily, but
Yeah, doing it in a way to respect their privacy, absolutely.
Thank you.
just thinking,
Can you pull up the site plan? I'm not following, I'm trying to see exactly which units are on that side and where the windows are located.
So we are talking, is it, no? Hold
Not
on.
the site plan, like a floor plan that shows where how those stairwells are.
The floor plan, I do not. Lisa, do you have a floor plan?
It's at the bottom of it's on the elevation sheet if you go all the way down.
Yeah, that's on. And Nate, I may need you to come up here. Yeah. If I may, I'm going to ask Nate, our architect, to come up. He will introduce himself with his name and address for the record.
So you can see on the upper,
Name and address for the record.
I'm Nate Mackey.
Work address.
I work at Perlman Architects, 4808 North 24th Street, Phoenix, Arizona. So if we look at the first floor plan, the upper right would be the area that looks at the plan. You're now looking at the first floor here. The unit on the right side is the unit that faces the single-story homes. And if you scroll back up to the second floor, we have a bedroom and a bonus room and a stairwell, or a little loft area and a stairwell up there. We only have the windows facing the rear in that loft area, bonus little area there, and the stairwell itself.
Oh, so it's not just the stairwell, it's also the bonus room
Correct.
that has the windows going out.
and it's only on that, we're gonna just say plan on the right side of the plan, not in the back.
Well, they mirror, I think.
Well, if you look at the left side, we have more windows that face the street portion
Yeah.
But that was part of, we did remove some of the windows that face the rear.
And
but
I'm
we just-
thinking
we
more
only-
specifically in the case of the Wheat family, that's on this far plan right, correct? Okay.
Correct. And we can look at different solutions to minimize that or make it translucent so that they can still maintain their privacy.
Something you can work on with them, most likely, and figure that out.
Yeah, I see you have trees planned on the site plan, and
Correct.
a tree can get in front of a window in a very convenient way. You may want to consider that.
Okay.
Any more questions for the applicant? Okay, I guess now we'll go ahead and discuss it amongst ourselves. Or if you have questions for staff, now's the time to, otherwise. Anyone have any comments?
I have some comments.
Okay.
I love that this project's going in. Growing up in Mesa, the Mesa Royale's been there for a long time. And I love that East CPLC is the one that finally got it. When I heard that they were the ones doing this, I was overjoyed, knowing all the kind of the history of how they've tried to help these people. So I'm really, really great. And I'm glad that these are for sale units coming in. I'm just, you've got me 98%. My concern is still that when you're coming on the light rail, you're going to go through Tempe, you're going to see all the brand new steel and aluminum and glass buildings, and there's going to be a line. It's going to be like, okay, now we've hit Mesa, and it's, a couple of tumbleweeds are going to come by, and it's going to look like some other sort of thing. It's not going to look as modern as Tempe. There's going to feel very, very different. I know that these are back off of the main street, but there's 3 stories high, so they're still going to be quite visible, I think, from anywhere when you're coming down. I know there's a lot of conversation, and a lot of developers that come in, they say they want to blend in the neighborhood. We're trying to blend in the existing neighborhood. I don't know how important that is. Again, I lived in New York where you could put a skyscraper next to a 300-year-old building and no one thought twice about it. I also don't even know if you take sort of the design of the neighborhood and then you pull it up 3 stories high, I don't know if that's even blending per se, right? It's suddenly a very different looking thing. So I would continue to say, maybe this is something that again, this will have to go to design review, and maybe that's the right place to do it, but when we're allowing for higher density, when we're, the city is permitting all this higher density and this growth along Main Street, we need to, staff, planning, zoning board, design review, everyone needs to say, this needs to look like the future of Mesa. This needs to not look like the historical Mesa. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Any other comments?
The only comment I wanted to make is I really commend you folks that are doing the development on this redevelopment site. There's a lot of site constraints. It's tough, and I think you've done a good job. I realize that, everything is different, and quality design is what we're looking for, and we do want a variety of different types of projects, and I commend your efforts on this. I know staff worked hard on it. I know you guys have worked hard on it, and I appreciate you guys working together. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments or a motion?
I would. Go ahead.
Okay, you'd like to make a motion? Would you like to go ahead and read it officially into the record for us? You can combine 4B and, yeah, both of them together.
I recommend approval of PZ 18149, ZON 18-00446 within the 600 block of West Pepper Place and 0 block of North Date, as well as item PZ 18148, preliminary plat for within the 600 block of West Pepper Place, south and north sides, and 0 block of North Date.
Thanks. We're getting some looks over here. Maybe I was wrong.
Do you need us to read the zoning case number in? Is that what we're missing?
I was looking for you saying approval with conditions.
Approval with conditions.
And I would second that.
Okay, I think we have a motion and then we have a second. All vote, please. Okay, the motion passes unanimously with Board Member Sarkisian absent. Okay, thank you very much. All right, the next item that we'll be talking about is item 5E, which is the Mesa Fiesta preliminary plat. It's District 3, 1337 through 1361 South Alma School Road, located south of Southern Avenue on the east side of Alma School Road on approximately 16.51 acres. And Cassie Welch is the planner. Could you please give us a presentation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This request is for a preliminary plat for an existing commercial center located south of Southern Avenue on the east side of Alma School Road. This request will allow the subdivision of 2 existing commercial buildings for private ownership. If you look at the preliminary plat, there's 2 existing commercial buildings and 8 tenants. And this request will just allow for individual ownership of each unit within those buildings, with a common ownership of the parking and open space.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Board Member Crockett, you think you had some comments you wanted to make on this?
I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I've had some concerns about this item since I saw it on the agenda. I've been involved in on at least one of these redevelopment area plans for Mesa, and it's very difficult when you have fractionalized ownership to do something to improve the neighborhood. And we've had a lot of difficulty right across the street at Fiesta Mall in terms of getting that property repositioned for a use post-mall. And I just think that we're going the wrong direction with this in terms of fractionalizing the ownership. I think it works better in terms of redevelopment if we have fewer owners rather than more owners. And so I have a concern about this. And I think we're moving in the wrong direction.
Okay. Does anyone else have any comments?
I have the same concerns, but I don't know what we do with those concerns.
Yeah, Chair, board members understand the concerns, and we were just visiting about, we do often in some of these older areas of town where we have smaller lots that have been developed over time to try to help facilitate redevelopment, encourage the combining of back to larger properties so you can do something more with it. So do understand that concern. But they meet all the requirements of the subdivision regulations for the subdivision. And so from the staff perspective, we're really somewhat limited in our ability to not approve the proposal.
Yeah, I don't know if we don't have any ability, do we? Unless it has to do with the technical aspects of the
That's
plat,
correct, if it meets technical requirements.
unfortunately.
Well, but it comes before here because we can not approve it, right? I mean, when it comes before the planning and zoning board.
Chair, board members, it would be because there's some design issue that leads it to not meeting the technical requirements of the code would be what you'd really have to look at.
Well, we don't have to say why we disapprove. Like, we could all vote no on it and it would stop, right? I'm not saying we're going to do this. I'm just asking theoretically.
Yeah, I think for the record, the action like that would be very important to say why you would be taking that action.
But does anyone else have any comments? Board Member Crockett, did you want to say?
Well, Madam Chair, I just feel that we're creating a problem that we're going to live with in the future by doing this. And if our hands are really tied, I mean, I tend to agree with Member Boyle that it's before us for a vote. And if it's purely a ministerial function and there's no ability to vote no on this, then I'm not sure why it's in front of us for a vote. But I think if I have a vote, I'm going to exercise that vote in the way that I believe I should. So,
And I guess you can do that. I think you have to make clear your reasons for denying. But would it help to have the applicant come up and talking about this at all? Or do you have any questions that might be answered as to the reasoning behind this and why not proceeding as it is now and splitting it off into individual owners?
I think I would like to hear from the applicant and understand the thinking behind this. And
Maybe that is the applicant here for this item? Uh-oh. Looks like no. Darn. All right. Well, sorry about that. I thought that might have been a good idea.
yeah, is there a possibility to hold this over and have the applicant speak to this, or?
make a motion
Well,
to continue?
Madam Chair, I would support a continuance of this item so that we could hear from the applicant.
Okay,
I would,
everybody? All right, well, would you like to go ahead and make a
Yeah, make the
motion to
motion.
continue, and then we'll second it and vote?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I would move that item 5E, PZ 18140 be continued to our next P and Z meeting.
So if you could go ahead and say the October 17th meeting.
I'm sorry?
October 17th meeting.
October 17, 2018.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, everybody vote, please. Okay, so it passes. We'll go ahead and continue this to next month's meeting. Okay. What I would like to ask, Mr. Wesley, if it's okay, if perhaps we move the redevelopment area plan presentations after item 7A to give everybody a chance to speak? Okay, so we'll move 7A up on the agenda. And this is 7A, it's case ZON 18-00509, District 1, 860 North Center Street, located east of Country Club Drive, south of Brown Road on 1.7 acres approximately. This is a request for a council use permit for social service facility and a special use permit for a parking reduction. The request will allow for an inpatient substance abuse detoxification and treatment center. And our staff planner is Ryan McCann. Give us a presentation, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. As you just stated, the property is located at 860 North Center Street, and this request will allow for an inpatient substance abuse and detoxification treatment center. The zoning ordinance identifies substance abuse detoxification and treatment centers as social service facilities and requires the approval of a council use permit. The property has operated as a substance abuse facility for approximately 17 years as a legal non-conforming use. The applicant is requesting to add the detox component, which intensifies the use and triggering the council use permit. The applicant did complete a citizen participation process. They held a neighborhood meeting with approximately 13 citizens in attendance. Staff has heard from 2 citizens recently expressing their concerns brought up to in your study session. Staff has reviewed the proposal and found it is consistent with the criteria as outlined in the general plan. The proposed social service facility is permitted within the RM2 district with the approval of a council use permit. The proposed social service facility will provide a housing type that is not offered in the neighborhood and will add to the diversity of the housing options and provide the necessary services for people recovering from substance abuse. As previously noted, the substance abuse rehabilitation facility has been in operation for approximately 17 years. The only change at this point is one of the 8 buildings to provide detoxification services. Staff is unaware of any negative impacts caused by the current facility in operation. The existing site and proposal does not include any exterior modifications to the site or buildings. Based on feedback that they gathered from the neighborhood, there is an existing pedestrian gate connecting the west side of the property to the adjacent neighborhood. And in response to concerns from neighbors, they are going to lock that and make it a fire access emergency only. Other than that, they will be applying for a special use permit for a parking reduction. The parking reduction or special use permit for the parking reduction will be only for the associated with the social service facility use. Staff has reviewed the proposal and found it complies with the Ford's standard requirements as outlined in the ordinance. Substance abuse and detoxification centers are parked under the hospital, hospice, nursing home parking ratio, which is 1 to 400. That would require 55 spaces and 28 are currently existing, which would be a reduction in 28 spaces. To conclude, the proposed project complies with the general plan and meets the review criteria for a council use permit for a social service facility and special use permit for a parking reduction. Staff also encourages this type of site for facilities that provide services and treatment for people. It is located on a collector street with multi-residential uses adjacent and is residential in nature. This type of site is preferred over small single residential home sites that could be located within the middle of a neighborhood. With that, staff is recommending approval with conditions. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I understand our city attorney might want to add a few comments about the use permit criteria for our review and how we make our motion?
Thank you, Chair, board members. With regards to the applicant's request for a council use permit, your decision on whether or not to grant the council use permit is an administrative act. This means that your discretion is limited to the guidelines set by the city in the city code. The Mesa zoning ordinance establishes the 4 criteria that you can consider, and it states that a council use permit can only be granted if it meets the 4 criteria. And it's outlined in your your staff report, but I will go ahead and read those 4 criteria now that you can consider when looking at this request. The first one is whether it advances the goals and objectives of and is consistent with the policies of the general plan and any other applicable city plans or policies. The second criteria, the location, size, design, and operating characteristics of the proposed project are consistent with the purposes of the district where it is located and conforms with the general plan and with any other applicable city plan or policies. The third requirement is that it is not injurious or detrimental to the adjacent or surrounding properties in the area or the proposed project or improvements in the neighborhood or to the general welfare of the city, and adequate public services, public facilities, and public infrastructure are available to serve the proposed project. And as mentioned yesterday, this is a facility that will serve people that are recovering from drug and alcohol addiction. And as I mentioned yesterday, the applicant may be able to assert some fair housing protection.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for staff at this point? Okay, we'd like to invite the applicant up for presentation, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Ralph Pugh. My office address is at 1744 South Val Vista Drive. It's a pleasure to be with you here today on behalf of Summit Behavioral Health Care. Glad to have Vanessa McDonald here with me too. Without her, none of this happens right, and it just doesn't flow and doesn't work smoothly. Just a brief update on Summit. Summit Healthcare is a treatment facility for those who have addictions to drugs and alcohol and other substance abuses. They are located in 11 states and have 17 facilities. They are a very high-end treatment facility, and I'm hopeful that in the few minutes we have together here, I can help explain what happens on this campus, what happened before for the last 17 years, and hopefully talk to my friends from Mesa Grande that I see here, Dee and my neighbor Mike, and I'm not sure who all's here, but there's Joan, everybody. So I'm gonna try to talk to everyone at one time and see if I can help kind of get the facts of this one straight. So this is a site that has been in Mesa for at least 17 years. Most of us know it as Women in New Recovery. It has been operated under that name and under those guidelines for a long time. Women in New Recovery was truly, in its beginning and most of its tenure, a sobriety living, transitional place for women to be as they tried to transition, endeavored to transition back into life from their substance use dependencies. That meant that people came and went all day long. They could walk in and out at any time. They actually lived there. Many of them were there for 6, 7, 8 months. And that's how this facility has been operated. And it changed and morphed a little bit in later years. But it has been there, and it is indeed today a legal nonconformity, a grandfathered use. So Summit purchases the property over a year ago, and they then begin to operate their facility. Their treatment and care is significantly different. No one walks into Summit from off the street. Most of the clients who use the services here come from Sky Harbor Airport or Gateway, arrive here, they're picked up. They're brought to the site. They have been through detox at that point, generally speaking, and they enter into roughly a 30-day treatment plan where they are visited by doctors, nurses, psychologists, therapists, dietitians. They are taught the nature of their dependency. They are given skills to overcome it, and they do not leave the campus. They are not a threat to our society. There have been 0 complaints about the operation of Summit since they took over a year ago. And so, following up then on a question that came at the neighborhood meeting, which I was not in attendance at, there was a question about security. And so what has happened there, you can see the site located on North Center Street, kind of north of where the athletics train and south of the Fitch Farm property. We'll hone in on it a little bit more, kind of on the left-hand side of Center, which is the west side. You'll notice that it is residential in character. It is single story. It blends in with the area and the community, and again, has been there for a long time. Now, as we look closer, you begin to see that there are 8 individual buildings there that look characteristically like a home. In the past, when it was Women in New Care, there was a gate that allowed the women who were there to exit to the west onto Drew Street. And that was a question that came up in the neighborhood meeting. Can you do something about that? Well, we can, and we did. That gate has now been locked, and it is only available to access the site by the fire department with a Knox lock system on the gate. So we've done that, although none of our clients had problems going out into the community. They did not do that, but apparently when Women in New Recovery was there, that did happen from time to time. So that security issue has been taken care of and resolved if there even was one. So why are we here today? The only reason we're here today is for one of the 8 buildings to be able to offer detoxification services. And it's the building on the north side in the middle. That's the only reason. If it weren't for that, we would not be here, and Summit would continue the great service that they render. Now, when you say detox, that word sparks fear in all of us. But if you know the reality of drug treatment, it really isn't anything to be afraid of. Because, first of all, Summit is very professional in what they do. They do not take patients on probation. They don't take court-ordered patients. They don't take patients out of prison recently. And they require an intake form that if you have any medical or psychotic problems, or if in the course of detox you are a harm to yourself or others, they don't admit them. And consequently, that house, that one structure that will have roughly 8 to 10 individuals at any one time, perhaps, maybe less given the circumstances, will have an RN and a tech 24/7 within the building. So it is very well managed, very well maintained, and I think people probably sit in this audience or maybe in the neighborhood and think, oh my goodness, we got people yelling and screaming and hitting their heads against the wall and crying out for help. That's just not the case. We don't handle those types of individuals. They have a higher level of care, and we move them elsewhere. So that's the only reason we're here. Otherwise, we'd continue doing what we're doing, and we would respectfully ask this board and our neighbors from Mesa Grande to recognize that one structure for the CUP to specifically allow the detox use is why we're here. Let me just address one other point that I'm sure we'll hear from tonight, or I'm assuming. There has been great discussion in Mesa about the language of the general plan concerning concentration of conditional use permits. General plans are broad documents. They are not written with the precision of a criminal statute, okay? And so there is some degree of interpretation that needs to be given to that concept in the general plan, and that's probably a worthy thing to consider, discuss, kind of reach some conclusion as to how that will be interpreted throughout the whole city. We certainly ask you and our neighbors to not invoke that question here on a site that's been in place for 17 years, and now that Summit's there, has increased and improved the quality of care. Frankly, the economics involved here are significant. If you or a friend or a family member need treatment here, it's roughly $17,000 to $20,000 per month to be here. And most clients are here for roughly 28 to 30 days. This is not a place where people walk in and off the street. So that's kind of a setting for why we're here today and the issues in front of us. I think, I don't want to reiterate all of the findings. Your staff report is page after page of conclusions on the findings. Frankly, I haven't read a staff report in a long time that says this project meets all of the findings in totality. So both as it relates to the CUP and the SUP for parking. Let me just quickly hit parking. 97% roughly of the folks who are clients who are being helped here do not drive to this site. They don't have cars. And when it comes to visitation, most of their families are further away and it's not convenient to get here. So parking is not an issue, and Summit has a well-managed plan. The visitation hours for building 1, are X to Y on certain day. For building 2, it's Z to Q or whatever, right? And so they stagger those, and so parking is not an issue, and we urge your support of the special use permit for that. Finally, I'll just conclude with the concentration idea. So as I stand here and the rest of you sit here today, the CUP, if it were to be granted here at this site for that one building, then recognize there's not a similar site that does anything close to what we're doing within 3 miles. So I hope there's not discussion today that we have too many of these here. And frankly, there's only 2 CUPs within a mile of here, and guess what they're for? One is for a charter school, which the code doesn't require anymore and the law doesn't allow. And secondly, is a medical training facility in the PEP zone, which is an employment zoning district. So this is not a concentration. This is not the case to raise that issue and be concerned about. To have a broad discussion, good idea, healthy thought, but not in the context of looking at this particular case and saying no to the CUP. We respectfully ask for your support of a recommendation of approval. We will bring quality care to individuals who need it here, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions or thoughts that you might have about it.
Thank you, Mr. Pugh. Any questions for Mr. Pugh? Yes. Oh, sorry. Board member.
Madam Chair, I just had a couple. Good afternoon, Mr. Pugh.
Crockett?
Does the use of the 8th building as a detox facility, does that change the number of people that are in this facility, or is it roughly the same before and after?
Madam Chair, today the facility is roughly only half occupied. So when it's ultimately occupied, building 8 will have less people than another building would, so that we would have more if it were not a detox. And frankly, part of that involves changing the interior of that building to meet state licensing requirements.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other question I've got, is just out of curiosity, do you have a sense for how many, I guess I'd like to know how many professionals will be, how many jobs or how many professionals are at this facility?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Crockett, in answer to that question, you have to start taking equivalencies for full-time employment. And so if you took all of those who visit here periodically, those who work part-time, and those who are full-time, it would be the equivalent of roughly 25 full-time employees. The key there, however, and the thing that makes Summit so wonderful and a good place to receive treatment is there are medical doctors here regularly. There are registered nurses all day long, 24/7. There's technicians. There's counselors, there's therapists. The building in the middle is where individuals go during the course of the day for classwork and instruction. Dietitians come to the site. And imagine this, when you're hungry, guess what happens? The food is catered here. It's all brought in, 3 meals a day and catered. So it is a really well-run facility and engages a lot of people.
Thank you.
Any other questions for
I have,
Mr. Pugh?
I have a couple, Mr. Pugh. If a patient is in this facility and decides they want to leave, what's that process? I know it's been explained before that they get driven somewhere or something like that, but what are their legal rights? If they just want to walk out the gate, what actually happens?
Okay, Madam Chair, Commissioner Boyle, first order of business, no one leaves the site without a staff member, period. And so if someone decided that they're going to leave, the staff has a protocol for that and would take them or help them find a way, typically with our own vehicles, take them to another point where they can then do what they need to do. But they don't leave without a staff member being there. And nor do they arrive, frankly, without being pre-cleared and have their forms approved, their medical conditions approved, and their payments made and that type of thing.
And so like, how far away do they go? Do they get to an Uber or a bus, or like, where does a staff member accompany them to? What's the next step?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Boyle, I'm going to turn to Joanna to help me with that because, frankly, I don't think it happens all that often. And when it does, my guess is they're going to have to go to one of the airports or somewhere, or have a family member meet them or pick them up, or come to the site and pick them up. I'm not sure. Joanna, do you have a thought on that, how that might happen?
So anytime we have a patient.
Please introduce yourself again. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Joanna Shapiro, and I have to say my address?
Yeah.
The work address, okay, 860 North Center Street. So when we have patients that are either admitting or discharging to our facility, we either provide concierge services, we will pick them up from the airport, we will also pick them up if their family lives in town, which is very rarely. We would pick them up from their homes because we want the traffic to be less, and parking, we just don't want everybody bringing their car, it's not safe. But on discharge, if somebody is needing a higher level of care or transferring back home, we would take them to that destination. We would never use Uber, public transportation, taxi. We are responsible for all of our patients at that facility.
Okay, I guess I'm asking because in my research on this sort of thing, in California and San Diego, the city or the Costa Mesa, there's an uptick of crime around neighborhood facilities, rehab facilities. And so I'm trying to figure out, well, is that just because in certain facilities you can just walk out, and is your facility, like, can these people end up in the neighborhood, or is it always 100% certain that they don't end up in this neighborhood on the street?
Well, our patients are all voluntary, and they are paying a lot of money. They're very motivated to get better, and our patients aren't just going to voluntarily leave in a city that they're not familiar with. And we make sure through our intake screening that they can follow our program guidelines, that they understand what our rules are to be in our treatment facility. So I do not feel that they're going to be wandering the neighborhood.
Okay, so this would be whatever these stats that they're finding in California, those don't apply to you. You're running a very different type of program.
We are running a very different program.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair, thank you. If there are comments, if we have a minute to respond, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Definitely. Yes, we will. Okay, so we'll go ahead and open up the public comment section. We've got a handful of cards here. Just, if I could just speak to all of you at once before I have you come up. If you could just state your name and address into the record, and just know that we have just 3 minutes allotted to everybody who wants to speak, and we'll have a clock ticking, and you'll be able to see your time too. So sorry, we're not trying to be rude or cut you off, but if you could be succinct, we'd appreciate it. The first card we have is Lynn Burnham. It's indicated that you're opposed to the item and you wish to speak.
Lynn Burnham, 1062 West 4th Place. I've lived at that address since 1959. I grew up there, later bought it from my parents. I've been there 33 years. Northwest Mesa has changed a lot in the years that I have been there. Because I spent all those years, I didn't particularly notice all of the changes until my wife, who did not grow up in the area, said, "Lynn, drive through the neighborhood as though you're entering it for the first time and tell me what you see. And unfortunately, as I did that, what I saw was 4 check cashing places a quarter of a mile from my house. I see halfway houses in homes in my neighborhood. I see places for homeless men, shelter not far from my house. And all of these facilities are good and need to be had. I'm not opposed to having the facilities. My concern is that there are facilities all around us that of their cells, one at a time, doesn't affect the neighborhood. But you continue to have additional such facilities, whether it's detox or a halfway house or whatever it is, and pretty soon it's a concern for the neighborhood, it's a concern for me. My wife is taking a master gardener class from U of A Extension, and she's learning that if the branches and the roots aren't even, that the tree can die. I feel that in our neighborhood, the roots, those who are productive and trying to make it a great place to live, are being overwhelmed by the branches that are becoming overgrown one by additional facilities that make it difficult and cause some people to move out of the neighborhood. And so this facility looks like a great facility. In and of itself, I'm not opposed to it. But as Mr. Pugh said, maybe this isn't the place to have the conversation. The problem is that we've tried to have the conversation with city staff, with councilmen, and it seems like we don't ever get anywhere. And so I'm here to say, okay, vote no, so it'll raise some eyebrows, and so we can have a conversation and start doing something different. The general plan talks about not concentrating services in one area. We have those services in this area, and we need to stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. The next card is, I'm sorry, Rebecca Torek? I'm sorry, I can't read yet the handwriting there.
My name is Rebecca Torok, and I own 50 West 9th Place. So it's a block from the Canyon Vista site. My property is a multifamily building with 12 units, represents about 35 tenants. I just asked my property manager today. I'm very concerned about how recently I just found out about this. I'm sort of still in shock about why I didn't receive any kind of information about this. I learned now, speaking to Ryan Monday morning, that there was a meeting all the way back in August 13th, I believe. And I just became aware of this on Friday, the 14th. My property managers got the letter on Wednesday or Thursday of that same week, and so they passed it to me on Friday, and I called immediately to the city of Mesa and spoke to Ryan McCann. And so Monday is the first I've had any information about what's going on, and yet I have 35 people that I represent, that I need to make sure that they're secure and safe. They're young children, teenagers, families living in that building that's just very, very close by. And so, especially in light of the fact that, an uptick of crime happens around rehab facilities, I'm concerned about my residents' security. I'm concerned about their property. I'm concerned about vacancy in my building, and I'm concerned about property values. So the gentleman that spoke about the type of the operation and this detox facility, he mentioned that 28 to 30 days would be the typical amount of time that people would stay in the facility. But he didn't mention what on the lower end, what is the least they may stay. I mean, that kind of turnover is what I'm concerned about. My property managers are concerned about it. Mike from Peak Investment Properties mentioned that if you had a tenant or residents in these facilities that are staying 6 months, that would be a lot calmer and more, less problematic than people that were staying in just a number of days. I'm concerned about the kinds of people they may visit these residents, and that may be why, uptick of crime around rehab facilities, the types of, so I would like to, I'd like to know that this wasn't being decided on anytime really quickly, because I haven't even had a chance really to learn about all of the issues involved with this. And I feel like, in speaking to a neighbor that I just met here today, that's true of some of the other neighbors nearby. So just a chance to get more information and, more what could be done.
Thank you. We'll ask the applicant to talk about the notification process when he comes back up. And he'll address some of your other questions too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mike Wright.
My name is Mike Wright. I live at 629 West Caballero Circle, and I'm the owner of the Wright House on University, so I have a business in West Mesa too. I will merely say what Mr. Burnham has said, that we are concerned, and you're always going to hear from us with regard to every matter that comes before you, dealing with issues that concentrate such properties as social services properties, low-income housing, low-grade commercial, and so forth, because generally the property values are depleting as these properties accumulate. This particular property and this particular use, I really don't have much concern about. In fact, my youngest daughter spent some time at Winter successfully, so I'm sympathetic to the use of the property. But again, we need to lodge our concerns each and every time that these types of properties and issues come up. And we seek an opportunity to have a more robust discussion with the city about this issue of the concentration of these kinds of properties in West Mesa. If you have any questions, advise.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Wright?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next card is Derek Brosman.
Good late afternoon, evening, Chairman and Board. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I wrote down most of my notes. I know that's boring, but forgive me because I forget things.
Mr. Brosman, could you just state your name
Oh, I'm sorry.
and address
Derek
first?
Brosman, 639 West Contessa Circle. So I live about 1.5 miles away. I'm a Mesa native, went to Westwood High School, live in the area, currently serve on the Housing and Community Development Board. I only mention that because to add flavor to who I am and where I serve. I'm concerned specifically about this project and others, but we're going to talk about this one while I'm here. The city of Mesa is only as strong as its weakest link, and West Mesa is definitely the weakest link of Mesa. I have seen over the years a number of visible segregation of the poor and concentration of poverty, coupled with massive increases in social services in this area. Whether that concentration of poverty is deliberate or it's done by happenstance, I don't know. What I do know is that the amount of Mesa's population utilizing social services has increased precipitously and recently. I'm going to cite a couple statistics because I'm a statistics person. I'm in banking, so that's my brain. The West Mesa redevelopment plan that's on the city's website encompasses areas just west of Country Club. And it has a very disturbing set of crime rates. I just want to read to you verbatim. It says the West Mesa redevelopment area study, area's crime average rate over that 5 years time span, which is the last 5 years from 2012 to 2016, was 50% greater than the city of Mesa as a whole. West Mesa study area had a higher crime rate than the overall city of Mesa for each of the last 5 years. So I postulate that there is indeed a correlation between social services and crime. Number two, the general plan. You just heard from the city that this meets the general plan. I would push back vehemently against that.
I'm going to read you verbatim what it says in the general plan. It says, quote, "It is also important that we do not have an overconcentration of uses that require a conditional use permit in neighborhoods. These uses include group homes, social service agencies, and businesses that are typically considered incompatible with and detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood. Concentrations of these uses can drive down property values, create additional social service issues, and burden local schools." This raises really two questions. The first one is, why does the city continue to support social service concentration in West Mesa? Significantly high amounts of that. Number two, if you are unsure about this concentration in West Mesa, based on the voter-approved general plan, we must stop now and reevaluate. I know they said that you have limited use on how you can vote for this, but this does not meet the general plan. It doesn't say anything about you can't have a very similar service within 3 miles. It says social services. Lastly, we should not just rubber stamp anything and everything that comes in front of us. We should ask why here and why now. Am I out of time?
Yes.
I'll just leave with one thought. My opposition is not necessarily against this project. It sounds great on its merits. It has nothing to do with that. We have to stop what we're doing, reevaluate as a city, put a stop, and then take a look at everything. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Monteith.
Good afternoon. My name's Dee Montague. I live at 553 North Orange Street. Last month we were here when they were discussing the zoning case that's on the agenda 4A, and it was continued. I was appreciative of Board Member Villanueva Salcedo's question. What is an overconcentration? I agree with Mr. Brosman. This does not meet the general plan. It's in direct contravention of the general plan. There is an overconcentration of social service agencies that require a plan. I went home that night after the meeting last month, and I did a search. I just Google searched 13 different items: men's shelters, women's shelters, detox, transitional living centers, and every one of them pulled up a map. And 90% of everything pulled up on that map was in West Mesa. Now, we are having discussions that we would like to have you ask the city and get in a broader discussion. What is an overconcentration, and how can we put the brakes on this area? One thought, for example, that the Mesa Grande steering committee is proposing or thinking of and drafting would be to have it say no additional service can come in a high school attendance area if there's any other high school attendance area in the city that has fewer than 50% of that number that's already in the area. For example, if you have 100 in the Westwood High School area, and if Skyview only has 25, then you can't have any more in West Mesa until the others get to be at least half. We're just saying just half, not even equal. But there are other facts that go into West Mesa that Mr. Brosman didn't mention, and one of them is poverty. West Mesa, by the census block counts, has 22% of its residents living below the poverty line. Compared to overall Mesa, 8 or 9%. Compared to Tempe, Chandler, Scottsdale, Gilbert, it's obvious that this is a distressed area. I met at the public meeting with the applicant. I'm very impressed by what they do. But everybody that comes in front of you has a great presentation, and it's just one more. If the general plan says an overconcentration affects the schools, affects the value of property and the nature of your community, we have to stop someplace, and I say we stop with a no vote here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Stephanie Wright.
Madam Chair and board members, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Stephanie Wright. I live at 660 North Date in Mesa. I'm here this afternoon to speak against the addition of a detox unit at Canyon Vista at 860 North Center. In 1993, and some of you probably weren't even born then, the City of Mesa created a citywide initiative entitled Building a Healthier Mesa. We've had different plays on that over the years. But back then in 1993, I jumped on board at the chance to be a part of organizing the neighborhoods in the Carson Junior High boundaries. And as some of you know, I am still actively involved in trying to build a healthier Mesa and follow one of our early mission statements, about 25 years old, a rising tide lifts all ships. Over the years, I've used phrases in my neighborhood concerning social services such as, Mr. Pugh, overly concentrated, out of balance, at the tipping point, questions like, what should our best practices be? Or more often than you can imagine, people have asked, okay, in West Mesa, what came first, the chicken or the egg, as far as identifying social services? Or most recently, the question asked a lot on Facebook in West Mesa is, did you make a report to Mesa PD on what was going on? Those of us who choose to make west of Gilbert Road our home and have invested our time, our money, our community involvement, these phrases are in our vocabulary every day. The request for a council use permit will intensify the current existing use at Canyon Vista. An intense request that again begs an answer to those questions I previously stated. Whether our current situation in West Mesa has happened by chance, by neglect, or by design, let's take a breather and make an honest effort to look at the list that the City of Mesa was asked to provide to the board last month at the meeting. Where are our social services located in our city, in particular west of Gilbert Road? Are there any areas like ours that are more towards the tipping point and out of balance or oversaturated with more than our share of what any other place in Mesa, zip code, or neighborhood can handle in order to remain vibrant? Give us a chance in West Mesa to be a part of the city's effort to revitalize its neighborhoods, especially those areas that surround what's going on downtown and with bringing ASU to downtown. Give us a chance to be part of the anticipated renaissance and voting against this use that sits next to two historic districts across the street from the Oakland A's training facilities, and please back our continuing efforts to make Mesa healthier. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Tanya Collins.
Madam Chairman, I asked not to speak. They've already said everything I intended to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry Earls.
Thank you. My name is Jerry Earls. I live at 51 West 9th Street. I'm 3 doors down from their backyard. Their entire facility is surrounded by single-family residentials. So I misunderstood what you said earlier about that, but it's all single-family homes around there. And I've spoken with all my neighbors within a 2-block radius, and the ones that I've been able to talk to are all opposed to this. We do not want a detox facility there. I understand the facility is already in operation. It has been in operation for quite a number of years. I've lived in that house for 20 years. The women that had the shelter before were horrible. Their boyfriends would meet them on Drew Street. They used to come in and out of the back gate. I'm one of the ones that suggested they put a lock on that gate, and I do appreciate the fact that they did that. But that fence is a joke. My 5-year-old grandson could climb over if he wanted to. So if somebody in that detox facility decided to go to wig out, for example, there's not much stopping him. They told us at the last meeting, which I attended, that yes, they would call the police, but they also told us, in answer to yours, Mr. Boyle, that they could just walk out. What he said earlier is not what we were told at the August 13th, because we specifically asked that question. If these people choose to walk off that facility, what are you going to do about it? And they said, we cannot stop them. This is not a jail. Because they're paying, they don't assume they will do that, but I can assume that they just might. And in our neighborhood, we have a lot of elderly, we have disabled people, we have people that are on vacation, single family, or single women that live in our neighborhood, and there's a lot of times people are gone for several days at a time, and if someone wanders through our neighborhood, you know, anything could happen. So I just want to make sure that, that I'm representing a lot of the neighbors because they can't be here for those reasons. So I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let's see here. Joshua Bakar? Yeah. I'm sorry, I mispronounced it probably. Yeah, I know the dots. Oh, I apologize. Okay, thank you. But we're putting this into the record that you are opposed to this request. Okay, and the last card, Ben Layton.
My name is Ben Layton. I live at 736 East 6th Place. I've never done this before, so thank you for your patience. I'm an ecclesiastical leader in that neighborhood as well. We're having a higher concentration of all kinds of homeless and drug issues that we've noticed, especially since the Escobedo project was revitalized. We see all kinds of trouble in that neighborhood. I know that this project is specifically designed and has a wonderful presentation. However, it is just, as Mr. Montague said, it's just one more, and we'd like to see the city adopt a more clear plan on how to handle these proposals in the future so we don't end up with continued over-concentration in the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so that is all the blue cards that we had. Mr. Pugh, would you like to come back up here and address some of the neighbor comments?
Madam Chair, this is a delicate balance here. Way too many friends in the audience and my history in living in West Mesa and all those things combine into this comment. I think the crux of the issue and the comments tonight focus on the language of the general plan. And I think in following what Mr. Montague had to say with respect to defining a geographical area by high school or something of that nature would be helpful compared to the word that's in the general plan now, which is area. Right? So who knows what that area is? And so as we stand here tonight, there's not another facility anywhere like this one within 3 miles, and probably nothing like it within many more. So is 3 miles an area? Or are we taking an area from Gilbert Road to the canal, to Tempe? If that's the case, then let's define it that way in the code. And I just would like to be as respectful as I can here tonight and simply say, to deny the council use permit, recommend denial of it tonight, just on the principle of the matter, simply says, well, okay, 8 to 10 people who need to recover because they're ill and they need help, and they'll be supervised 24/7 in one of those houses on site, is to say no. Because why? We're standing up for a principle that we want fixed, but this isn't the fix. The fix is a broader discussion. So we urge you to think about that and would remind everyone, frankly, if there were 7, 8 people in that room, in that structure there, undergoing detox treatment for a week to 10 days, whatever it might be, no one in this room, not one human being here would know the difference or experience the difference. None of those people who stood at this podium will have their life changed 1 ounce. But the people in that room will, and it will make a difference to them. And those who visit them, with the most kind answer I can give to the nice lady that stood up and said, who comes to visit these people? The answer is us. Every one of us in this room, in one way or another, will have a family, a friend, or someone close to us, and we will visit. Thank you. We urge your support.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pugh. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Pugh at this time?
Can you clarify the we cannot stop them, not a jail comment? That's one that I couldn't, clarify that, please.
Madam Chair, Board Member Boyle, this is not a jail, right? This is a voluntary treatment facility. People do not walk out of here and into the neighborhood as they sometimes did, obviously, in women in new care. If someone wants to leave, as Joanna said earlier, a member of the staff will go with them, will take their concierge service and drive them to wherever they're going to meet family, or they'll wait with them while the family comes to pick them up, or they'll take them wherever they need to go. They will not walk off of this site. It just won't happen. And frankly, we have staff members who visit each of those houses multiple times a day on campus. So it is well secured, and to say that it's not is just historical treatment in the last 17 years.
Okay, but they could.
Let's say that they could.
I'm trying to just figure out whatever was told to him and whatever you're saying here. I'm trying to find
In theory, should someone decide they're just going to run and break, I guess that could happen. That doesn't happen. They've been there for a year. Nothing like that has happened. And these people are sick, and they need medical care, and they need compassion. And we here tonight are talking about that, and that's the topic.
Okay, that's my question.
Any other questions for Mr. Pugh? No. Do we have staff comment over there?
Chair, board members, if you don't mind, I thought I would just interject a thing or two. I don't know if I'm helping or muddying things or confusing them. I don't know, but I'll interject a couple of things. One is to turn to Chapter 70 of the zoning ordinance, which is the chapter on conditional use permits. It kind of sets a parameter for why this is even here and what we do with conditional use permits. And it says, this chapter describes the process and general requirements applicable to those uses for which a conditional use permit is required. These uses require special consideration to ensure they can be designed, located, and operated in a manner that will not interfere with the use and enjoyment of surrounding properties. So that's kind of the baseline of why some things require either a special use permit or a council use permit and what we're doing. And then we get on into the specific evaluation criteria that go with a council use permit. And those have been outlined in your staff report, and Charlotte reviewed them earlier. So there's several criteria then that are established in the code that we then use as you look at those. And one of them, the one that we keep coming back to, is the general plan. And it's one of those criteria. And again, the general plan is a couple 100-page document with several different goals, objectives, policies, ideas for what we're trying to do to help create and sustain neighborhoods. Again, so we keep coming back to the one comment about concentration. That is just one of the items that we look at. But the problem we've been having has been pointed out, we don't have a clear definition of what constitutes an overconcentration. But the plan does talk about concentration of things that require the conditional use permits. And as staff has looked at this, I'm back up from that. So I understand what the neighborhoods point out for the residents that are there and the concerns they have. There are a number of uses that occur in the area that maybe are detrimental, that don't look great, that maybe cause further deterioration of property values and so forth, and several have been listed. Most of those, in fact, just about all of them don't require a conditional use permit, so they're kind of not in that realm of what we're meant to consider here. There are important considerations that we need to look at and try to address as a community. But as far as what the general plan was specifically talking about was those items that require a conditional use permit. And as we've looked for those items in this area, we have found them to be fairly dispersed, and nothing that we have seen from those specific items that we would consider to be a concentration that's detrimental to the neighborhood. Again, there are things that were pointed out, but not that really kind of fit that category. That's where staff has been on this. And with that, I know you have a difficult decision to make because it is a complex issue.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. On page 3 of the staff report, under criteria 1, Ryan kind of laid out that the intent of the provision that talks about overconcentration is to prevent a concentration of similar types of uses. And this might not be anything like, there's all kinds of uses that can fall under that category. So I think it seems like your policy has been, you look at this just on a use-by-use basis. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Chair, I'm going to say yes. Certainly anything of a kind of a similar nature that could be degrading to a neighborhood. There are a lot of things in the code that require SUPs and CUPs. And so if there were, concentrated, there might not be necessarily a social service facility, but if there's something else that requires a CUP because it takes that extra level of review and is right next door to this, so now we have, a couple of things that's right there together, we would bring that up and get a paper on the situation, maybe say we're starting to get too many just right there.
Looks like we've got, we might want to just start down the line, because I think
Mm-hmm.
everybody's probably got something to say. Would you like to start? We'll just,
I'd be happy
I have a
to, Madam
staff
Chair.
question. Is this going to be conversation, or is this still?
well,
Mine is a staff question.
yeah, I think we'll
Okay.
do staff questions, and then we'll,
Are these staff questions? I don't have a question for staff.
oh, okay. Shelley, did you?
And I do have a question for staff. How do we begin the conversation of the overconcentration? I know it's a very fine line with the Fair Housing Act that, for as far as halfway houses and different things like that, but I'm talking social services. How do we start that conversation instead of approving them one by one individually? That we look at whether it be, how do we start that? Whether we define an area, specific area that we, have, say that, talk about the numbers, the overconcentration in a specific area. Do we talk about Central Mesa and over, abundance? How do we start that conversation and get folks involved that need to be involved in that conversation?
And I hope you're not really expecting me to give you an answer to that question.
Well, I kind of did, but.
And, maybe it's a topic that we need to have some study session discussion to think about. I don't think we're going to necessarily come up with that here because, again, it's so broad. I think, again, I sympathize and understand the concerns in West Mesa as an older area of
Right.
our community. There are quite a number of things that go together that, if they're not treated appropriately, can continue to spiral and build on each other and make it a more challenging area, property values and crimes and whatever. But it's not really necessarily just these things. It's a wide range of things that
Right.
go into that. And so that's why we've gone through and we've done the Southwest redevelopment area, and we're doing the East and West Main redevelopment areas where we can do those things to try to draw more attention to and bring resources to help those areas, because, again, there are a wide range of things that contribute to those factors. And so just to single this kind of thing out, and even if we were successful in finding a way to define what an over-concentration of social service facilities would be, that in and of itself would only be kind of one piece to address, I think, larger and bigger issues that affect those property values and types of uses and conditions of properties and so forth that create the challenge.
And I agree with you there, but I just think at some point we need to start that conversation. As I've sat on this board over the last couple of years, I've seen, we kind of just, I guess we look at the use individually. We don't look at it as a whole, and I understand that there's some, it's kind of touchy to do that, but I also know that for some reason it kind of ends up to be in the West Mesa area, it's just a concentration. I do know there was a couple of them approved in kind of, I guess, East Mesa, considered East Mesa. The most recent one we did, I think, was over around Broadway and 64th Street, if you remember that one. There was a facility, a sober living facility, or detox facility there. But I think we need to start that conversation, that even all of Mesa do we have an overconcentration as opposed to Gilbert or Chandler or, Tempe? Somehow we need to start that conversation. And I don't know if it starts at our level, if it starts at the staff level, is it the city council level? Where do we start that conversation?
And I think this is a good place to start it. Again, probably better suited in a study session.
Right.
To try to look
Can we
at
get that
what
on the
those-
agenda then, on one of our future, pretty soon to talk about that? I mean, I guess that would be
Maybe in
your
a
call.
couple of months
Yeah.
to give you time to research different possibilities or
Be a
places.
great thing for your January meeting as far as I'm concerned.
More than a couple of months. In the very near future.
Interesting timing,
Yeah,
John.
so he's out.
Any other questions, the staff, before we just deliberate?
I have a question for staff. There's precedent for like liquor stores have to be a certain distance from schools, right? Aren't there are some rules where there's like a certain number of feet that they have to be different. Are there similar ones for you can only have X number of pawn shops within a certain distance of each other. Like, when does it switch from, liquor stores are definitely on the blacklist. When does it switch to, maybe not black, they're on a list. And when does it switch to these things no longer have, liquor stores and tattoo parlors and what are the other ones on the?
Check cashing.
Check cash, are those, they have to be a certain distance apart or no? Just liquor stores?
The liquor stores through state statute have a separation from schools and
Schools,
churches.
Uh-huh.
That's a state statute item, it's not a city
That's not a
zoning
city thing.
requirement.
And they're the only one that have a defined distance?
We do have in our code on the group homes for the handicap, we do have a 1,200-foot separation there. Mr. Ellsworth, do you remember anything else in our code that has? There used to be one on, was it on pawn shops or was it on tattoo parlors? Used to, but that was removed from the code. And medical marijuana has a distance separation.
And that's a city one?
That's a city one, correct. So it is possible to have those types of things if there's a defined reason for doing so.
And this is, what's the definition of a group home versus what this facility is? Is this considered a group home or is this something different?
This is something different. This is not considered a group home.
And what's the trigger that makes it different?
This is maybe not as clearly defined as we would like in our code, but a group home is typically a place where a person is really living for an extended period, as opposed to this is a treatment facility, a more of a short-term type medical-oriented use.
Okay. So it's sort of a amount of time they're going to live there?
Yes.
Sort of thing, okay. That's all my questions for staff at the moment.
Deanna, did you have any questions? Okay. All right, well, let's just start talking through this. I just have a couple comments just to throw out there. I don't like using an applicant or a project as an example on a larger issue that we can't deal with right now. I think that we definitely should look at our policies. I don't know what that is. Is it the general plan? Is it the area plans? Is it the zoning ordinance? Is it just an initiative, a direction from above? I don't know what that means, but I don't like to say no to a project to make an example or to set some sort of stage for something that we can't address now. But having said that, anybody else?
Chair,
like to
if I may jump in real quick, sorry, I know you're trying to be done with the staff, but just in case you weren't aware, as we went recently through the whole sober living ordinance item that didn't really come here, but you maybe heard about it with the council. One of the things we did raise with that is some questions about our zoning regulations, as they do deal with the variety of group housing. So again, that's not the social service thing we're talking about today, but the group housing, which is the sober living, the group homes for the handicapped. And we are in the process of hiring a consultant to come help us look at that portion of our code. And hope to get that person under contract here in the next month or two, and we'll go through that process. So again, we'll have through that maybe a means to at least start looking at part of this issue. Just want to make sure you're aware of that.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. Board Member Crockett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I haven't figured out, am I supposed to push a button here to speak? But it's lit already, so, am I good? Okay. Well, just a few thoughts and comments here. I really applaud the residents that came out to speak tonight, and I understand the concern. We need more people who are concerned about our neighborhoods in Mesa and that come out and take their time to get involved and address issues and be a voice to try to improve things. That being said, I'm planning to vote in favor of this item, and it's on this basis. This is an existing use today, and if this council use permit doesn't get approved, the applicant will continue doing at that facility what they're already doing. So we're not talking about a new facility here. What we're talking about is whether they are allowed to add a detox unit in the 8 units that are there. And I have not seen any evidence that doing that is going to have an adverse effect on the neighborhood. I understand the discussion about a concentration is a discussion that I agree with others on this board that we need to have, and we need to have it soon, not a year from now, but we need to have it soon about what does that mean for these neighborhoods. But in this application, I believe that this is a good project, a good applicant, a good neighbor. I think that the proposed addition of this detox facility will not negatively affect the neighborhood. So hopefully the citizens or the residents that came out today will continue to come out and make sure that this issue continues to be kept in the forefront, because it needs to be. I understand, where you live is really, really important, and those issues about having a safe neighborhood and a neighborhood that you are proud of, and where home prices are appreciating, those are important things, and I understand the impact that certain facilities can have on that. But that's my thinking on this.
Thank you. Board Member Allen?
Well, and I've kind of already expressed my opinion, but several things with this facility. One, it's existing and has been for 17 years. I think the improvements that have been done in the last year, since this company has bought it, has really kind of helped that neighborhood. People aren't coming and going like they were. So I, at the same time, I guess like some of the other board members, Ms. Dahlke, I don't like to use one as an example for all others. Again, as Mr. Crockett said, it's just, it's a constant use, but I also want to make sure that we start that conversation. I don't want it to get lost in time or whatever, that we start it if we can in the next month or two. I just think it's really important. I think we need to do it. We need to look at all of Mesa, because it needs to be, first of all, I don't like Mesa to be the only one that, houses every type of facility that no other city wants. We don't want that either. But we also want to spread things out. So I just think we need to start that conversation. And I'm saying not necessarily this is things that people don't want. What I'm talking about is the marijuana facilities and all the other things that are concentrated more in Mesa. So I think there's a larger conversation we need to have. And maybe that goes along with quality, but I too am supportive of this. I know we have to be very careful about the Fair Housing Act. We want to make sure that we don't cross that line when we look at things, but I just think that it's a bigger conversation. And this particular project is not the one that we need to have that, but we need to make sure that we don't lose that sight of that conversation.
Board Member Hassel, did you?
Yeah. This has been a very good meeting. I actually enjoy having so many opinions and so many great neighborhood members and a good applicant, and all of it together I've actually enjoyed, mainly because I believe that together we can come up with a much better solution for West Mesa specifically, and Mesa in general. After listening, you can envision how difficult it is to sit here, because ultimately I find myself agreeing with everyone today. Isn't that a hard place to be in as we're looking to advise council in which direction we feel as though this should go? I find it very difficult to do that in this case, but that said, I do have family that have used detox and sober living and all of these types of services. I recognize the importance of them, and I find it hard in both ways to think, okay, putting myself in the neighbor's shoes, would have trouble wanting it next door or down the street. Yet I saw the light that it brought to family as that service changed lives and saved lives. So what an interesting dynamic that we are faced with here, and I believe through further conversation, and look forward to being part of that conversation, we can arrive at a reasonable solution in the future for this type of thing, a good thing, a thing that is required. And I believe was appropriate to say that most of us will experience some version of this use in our lives, extended family and or friends. I'm also in favor of this project, mainly because in this case, if this were a brand new facility, I'd be hesitant to jump right on board and say we need to put it in right here in Mesa. This facility's existing. And because I see in the applicant a very organized pattern, a very well put together application, an increase in security and care over a 12-month period, I expect that same care will be provided in this new service, and agree that most likely, there's always the what if, but most likely it will be cared for in such a way that it won't affect the lives or the everyday living of the surrounding neighborhood. So a bit of a long response, but that's kind of where I'm at on the overall case.
Thank you. Mr. Boyle.
Let me begin by saying I love all you on this board before I tell you how wrong you are about this. Not a single one of you has discussed how this fits in the general plan. They gave us these 4 pieces of criteria. Does this advance the goals and objectives of the general plan? No, it does not. Not in any way, shape, or form. This is concentrating additional stuff in additional services like these in an area that has by far the lion's share of it. So it does not. The location, size, and design are consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. No, it is not. This is surrounded by single-family residences, and it is a giant facility. Does it harm the adjacent facilities? It absolutely does. The stats, the general plans say that crime is higher in areas like this. The general plan says that we cannot concentrate these services all in one area. So that is not correct as well. I think we as a board typically go with the flow. It's often, I am concerned that this board is just a rubber stamp. Oh, it's just one more. Oh, it's just one more. It's just one more. But when do you stop and say, you know what? This has to stop. This needs to be discussed now, instead of saying, oh, well, let's just let them keep doing it until January. Let's just keep doing it until next year. What about saying, no, this stops now, and when we get it figured out, that'll put the fire under everybody to get this figured out. Then, once it's figured out, then we will okay this, and then we will okay all of them with the criteria. Letting them just continue to come in, services like this one, the one that's also before the board that's being waited on, that's, what, a mile away in a similar area. Do we just say, oh yeah, that one too, that one too, that one too? And then there are 40 more of them before we discuss this in January. That's absolutely not the way to do this. I'm voting no on this, and I think that everybody should strongly reconsider the statements you already made. If you don't want to vote no, I would say let's get a continuance on this project, similar to the one that we did in, over by Fiesta Mall, until there is some strong criteria, not just, oh, well, a friend of mine needed this once, so it's okay, because that doesn't have any bearing on whether or not this is a good facility for the use. So I would propose, I guess, that we do a continuance until there's some defined criteria that we can all agree on, instead of just kind of guessing what we think is right from the general plan.
Okay, thank you. Deanna?
I don't consider service here to rubber stamp, and I do consider everything that comes forward. So I'll respectfully disagree with that statement. That said, given that this is an existing use and for the time that it has been in place, and given what's being proposed in the criteria we have before us today, I will be voting approval. I don't think it is in any way, shape, or form similar to what we've heard before. That's a new use, and we will consider that when it comes before us. I will continue to reiterate my concerns that we don't have good clarification on what overconcentration means. I respectfully disagree with many of the statements that are included in the staff report for this use. I believe we need a robust discussion. I have called for it before. I will continue to call for it around what this means. What kinds of guidelines do we use for weighing this? I don't believe that there's necessarily a causal relationship between services, social service facilities, and what's occurring in neighborhoods, but certainly it needs to be taken a look at. I live in a neighborhood in West Mesa and continue to choose to live there with an underserved community and many of the same characteristics as I've heard residents talk about this evening, with the population that doesn't come to city council meetings to speak, and in most cases don't have the capability to do so or the ability to do so. It is not unique to the neighbors that are here before us. It's not unique to many neighborhoods in Mesa. And frankly, I think the discussion needs to go beyond just planning and zoning. We have a particular role and we have particular guidelines as sitting members of this commission. We have other boards with other guidelines, with other roles and responsibilities. I don't think this is a conversation that stops just at P&Z. And frankly, this isn't a conversation that's new. This dates back to the time where I worked at the city and we had these same discussions. And frankly, I think the city has done a disservice to leave it go for so long. So if we, in some small part, can initiate that kind of discussion, and I will reiterate my request every single time we see something like this come before us, that we need some clarification, we need some robust discussion, but I think it goes beyond the scope of what this board is in charge of.
Thank you. I live in Northwest Mesa, and right in the midst of all of this, so I understand. But this is an existing use. I agree with the other board members, except for Mr. Boyle, because it's an existing use, that I'm in support of this, but I do really strongly suggest that our staff, I know you're very busy, but if you could at least maybe next month, just give us an idea of, you've thought about some things and maybe an idea of how we can get this fast-tracked to talk about this issue, generally speaking. That would be much appreciated. So having said all that, oh, yes.
Can I throw out one more
Okay.
thing? Would anyone, if we were to say this is to be continued until we can have better criteria about it, just to light the fire, to make the thing happen instead of just talk about it and then vote for it and go, would anyone be amenable to that? Or is everyone just like, nope, let's just let this go and then we'll see?
I'm just concerned because this will take time, and who knows, I'm not saying it's going to take a year, but let's just say it's not just a policy that we establish moving forward. It has to be codified in one of our documents, and that's going to take a process, and it's got to go through us and council and maybe even out to the public in some circumstances that I don't know. So I don't want to use this project as an example to say, hey, we're going to use you because we have all these other things we're trying to deal with. I don't think it's fair. They've already gone through the process so far. I think they've shown that it's a good project. I mean, it's been there for 17 years in a slightly different form, and there's only one unit or one building that's going to have this detox facility. And their business plan, the way they've shown it or described it, the security, I don't feel that there's going to be people running from this building into the neighbors, causing havoc, crime, and all that. I mean, in this particular use, that's my feeling.
But it's just one change. I mean, they're still going to, this isn't going to give them a hardship. They're going to continue to run their facility. This is still,
But it doesn't-
right? I mean, it's not going to hurt them in any way to
Well,
say,
I'm
no,
sure
just
the
keep doing this,
timing-
keep doing what you're doing until we get this figured out, whether or not it's okay to keep adding one more thing and one more thing and one more thing.
So we would have, yes.
And Madam Chair, I don't see it that way. This is an existing use, it's a change to an existing use. Unless someone shows me some evidence, we talk about, for example, crime statistics, but I don't see how approving a council use permit for a detox facility in this existing facility is going to affect that kind of change. So even if we had clarification from the mayor, the council on what overconcentration means, I think I'd still be voting for this because I just don't see the harm. I understand the argument about all of these facilities collectively and the impact that they have on a neighborhood and West Mesa in particular. But this is, to me, this is an example of what we want. I mean, this applicant has come in, they've spent money on this facility, they've upgraded it, it's a higher and better use. And I just don't support delaying that for some period of time so that this other discussion can occur.
All right, well, is it motion time? Would anybody like to make a motion? And do we have, whoever makes the motion, do they have to specifically list that criteria in their reasoning for their vote, or have we discussed it enough?
The Chair, assuming that you're going with the staff recommendations with the conditions, so I think I think you could reference the report and the staff analysis along with that. It may be helpful, but only if you felt like you really had something additional you wanted to add, would you need to enumerate that?
Okay, thank you.
So I'll take a stab at this. I would make a recommendation that this board approve ZON 18-00509, District 1, 860 North Center Street, located east of Country Club Drive, south of Brown, 1.7 acres, a council use permit for social service facility, and a special use permit for parking reduction. Along with this, the following the staff's outlined conditions or outlined, what's the word I'm looking for?
Findings in the report?
The analysis, the staff analysis in the staff report, determining if this meets those criteria as outlined for a special use or a council use permit.
Okay, thank you. We have.
Did I cover it?
And approval with the conditions.
Approval with conditions.
Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Go ahead and take a vote. Okay, so we have, the motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to item 6A, which is consideration and recommendation of the Mesa East Redevelopment Area Plan. Mr. Ellsworth.
Give it a second.
We'll wait.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, the items 6A and 6B are related. They are both redevelopment area plans for east and west, the east and west areas. These are, the redevelopment plans are a significant tool. A lot about what we discussed today. This is one of those steps in helping to improve these parts of Mesa that have seen some blight in the area. The redevelopment area plans include strategies and programs to help spur development in those areas to bring those areas back up. So this is one of those tools that could be utilized in that area as we look forward to ways to improve those areas around the central business district and in East and West Mesa, in those areas in those neighborhoods that are struggling. A lot of what we had just discussed today. The Office of Economic Development has hired a consultant and they've come forward with this plan. The Plan Division, we've looked at this plan and reviewed it for compliance with the general plan, the sub-area plans in the area, both specifically the Central Main Plan and the West Main Plan. They are in compliance with each of those. We are recommending approval. I would like to turn the time over to David Packard from the Office of Economic Development. He's prepared a report, a presentation that would go through what these plans actually include.
Thank you, Tom. And let me see, do I need to plug in a flash drive here? Okay. Get that plugged in. See if I can. Full page slides. Can you help? It's a PDF.
Yeah, just need, yeah, view full page. Full screen.
There we go. Whoops. All right, thank you. So as Tom introduced, I am David Packard. I'm a management assistant with our Office of Economic Development here, City of Mesa, and I've been the project lead for the city on these two redevelopment area plans. With me today is Felipe Zubia. He's been the lead consultant with Matrix Design Group from the beginning of the project, which is, as we'll detail, it's a little bit of a process. I'm excited to share this presentation with you. It's been a lot of time, a lot of effort into these plans, and we are very optimistic that they can bring about some good redevelopment in the east and the west sides of downtown Mesa. As a reminder, the reason I'm here today, as Tom also mentioned, as part of state statutory requirements, we need to present these plans to our planning board and verify that it's in compliance with our general plan. So that's the reason we're here tonight. We spoke with you a little bit last month about some of the statutory requirements, so I'll go over these briefly. Just what is an RDA, redevelopment area? It's an area designated by the city council to be in need of revitalization. Okay, and there's the two conditions. And the statutory requirements are found in ARS Title 36. And to go over one of those, next, it's the definition of blight. That's one of the items that we had to look at in this project. And there are 9 blight criteria. Some of them, as you can see, are visual, some are non-visual. Items such as, unsanitary or unsafe conditions, those are visual. Some items such as diversity of ownership, those are non-visual. That was a point that was brought up earlier in this meeting. That's a condition of blight. So we did a partial study for those 9 conditions. Some more information on what are visual, you can see in that first example. Some boarded up windows, also non-visual conditions in that second example. You'll notice there's,
Excuse me a second.
structures.
David, we're not seeing the same thing that you're seeing.
Oh.
Yeah, it does. It's beautiful.
Seen it for some reason.
So I am the example of blight, it looks like.
All these things. Okay, let's see if it's. Wow. I don't see anything that's. Let's go to your. Looks like it is. We're screen 2.
Business. Now you can see it, but I can't see it on my screen, but that's all right. That's right. That's right. So I'll go forward. Couple of slides. So here are the 9 conditions of blight found in Title 36 of ARS. And then a few visual and non-visual conditions that you can see. We've had a number of public open houses and had a number of phone calls throughout the process. And I think one of the main reasons for those have been some just common misconceptions. Wanted to remind the board that a redevelopment area does not necessarily does not have to include eminent domain, loss of personal property, or compensation. That's one of the major concerns of residents. That's not at the heart of what we're looking to do here. So why are we undertaking these projects? A number of reasons you can see on the screen: improve the quality of life, increase property values, encourage reinvestment, number of reasons. And how there's a couple of benefits that we get from redevelopment areas. An RDA designation is a necessary step for utilizing economic development tools that are available today. And it also could create access to certain federal funds and city general funds. So with that, I wanted to show the map of the 4 redevelopment areas we have in the city. And these 4 areas are connected, and together they comprise our central business district. So you'll see in purple, that's our downtown area. That's the town center redevelopment area. And that was established in 1999. The second one happened in 2016, our southwest redevelopment area, incorporating the Fiesta Mall area. And the reason we're here tonight is to discuss the east and west redevelopment areas. So in 2017, we conducted the parcel studies, and Felipe will talk a little bit more about that. But in August, we took these boundaries and the blight studies to City Council, and it was approved at that time. And we have been working since that time on these 2 plans to detail some of the programs and strategies that make up these east and west redevelopment area plans. So I'll turn the time over now to Felipe to discuss more of the nuts and bolts of the plans.
Great, thank you, David. Madam Chair, members of the board, thanks for having me. My name is Felipe Zubia with Matrix Design Group. At 2020 North Central, Phoenix, Arizona. So as David noted, the findings of necessity has already occurred. In fact, that was established in, I think, September, October of 2017. And in fact, part of that process, which I'll show you here, are you clicking or are you scrolling? Okay, thank you. We'll start with the east. The boundaries, as David noted, really match up with the town center RDA and CBD. And that's important because as we establish the RDA as well as the CBD, it needs to be one contiguous district. And then on the west for the east RDA, on the east boundary for the RDA is generally Gilbert Road, and on the south Broadway, the North University Drive. The west RDA, again, matches up not only with the town center redevelopment area, but also the southwest RDA, and then the western boundary being the actual town limits, city limits with between Tempe and the city of Mesa, that being Tempe Canal. And then on the north, generally University Drive. So what were the facts with regard to the findings of necessity? If I could describe that real quick, this process is really, you can look at it as 2 phases. The first phase being establishing the need. By establishing the need, you're going through that process called the findings of necessity. With that, what we did find is that there was a preponderance of blight within both the west and the east. And in fact, these numbers may not seem high, but they actually really are high. In fact, they're higher than what the southwest RDA was when that was established. So 56.4% of all the parcels within the west and nearly 58% of all the parcels in the east exhibited some form of blight. And just to be clear, as David mentioned, there's visual and non-visual forms of blight. Board member Crockett had mentioned the diversity of ownership being one of those conditions. And in fact, David, I think, explained that quite well. And that is, there's things that you don't see that aren't necessarily visual that could be hindering growth and development and causing some of the blight conditions. David did show some of those, but these are just some of the conditions that we saw when we were out there. These are just the visual conditions you see. The public outreach process, we did do a public outreach process as part of not only the findings of necessity, but also as part of the redevelopment planning. So in total, we had 3 public workshops. We've also had notices on the city's website, as well as postcards that have gone out, letters that have gone out, a couple of social media postings as well. So our reach has been quite extensive throughout the process. The dates here for the first was in June of 2017. Of course, that was part of the findings of necessity. As David also noted, we've had several calls. And generally, I think the overall sentiment was that people recognized that both areas had needs, and we did not find any objections to establishing the RDAs. The questions really centered on what does this mean for my property, and I believe we've satisfactorily addressed all of their concerns. The second public workshop actually was held also here at the City Hall in January 2018, January 16, 2018. The purpose of that initial meeting was to start the process of the redevelopment planning process, and in fact, phase 2 of the process, if you will. What we did is wanted to go out and show them some different concepts of what could be done in the area, not necessarily establishing new land uses. And if I could real quick, just make a real clear point. These do not establish new land uses. These RDAs do not establish new zoning districts. It simply is a guidance document. Should anybody come in for rezoning or redevelopment, staff would use this as guidance when they go through that process. And then finally, the third public workshop was held here recently. Again, generally supportive, some questions as to what it meant to their property. Then finally, what do the redevelopment plans do? I'm assuming, and I may be wrong, but you probably have a copy of the plans in your packet, is that right? Okay, so you've kind of gone through them. We'll go through them here real quick. So if you do have any questions as I go through, feel free to stop me. When we were going through the plans, again, we looked at some areas of interest, I'll call them, where we called focus areas, where we started looking at some areas that could experience some redevelopment sooner rather than later. Those focus areas in the east here, you'll note, are on University in Maine. And in the west, we took a look at a few areas, one being the Mekon Plaza area, another being the real dense multifamily area in the south, and then a few areas interspersed throughout the west area as well. So as we're putting together this guidance document, we also put together some conceptual land use categories and descriptions for those categories, and those were accompanied by some visual design options. And then finally, as we were putting the land use together also, we were looking at circulation, not only transportation, but more importantly, with these being more looked at as livable communities, walkable communities, we looked at bike ped opportunities, particularly in the east, and how do we get people from the trail along the canal, then down to the southwest in the park area. And here you see some of what we're recommending as future considerations to extend the existing bike routes as well as bike pedestrian routes. In the west, same thing, we looked at the circulation and what some of the recommendations could be for future extensions of bike ped routes and circulation. And then again, we did go through the process of identifying specific goals for each of the redevelopment areas and then subsequent policies that can inform and help implement those goals. In the West, one of the key features was recognizing really the organic growth of the Asian Multicultural District. And we did actually meet with the members of that community and those specific business owners. They were extremely excited and ecstatic about the process of the recognition, not necessarily for the support. They were pretty proud about the fact that we've done this on our own and really wanted to recognize that. So again, some of the strategies to help implement that goal or further the goal are within the plan. Attract new and expanding businesses in both the east and the west. Again, strategies to support that. Enhancing the infrastructure, strategies to support that. Creating an attractive, safe, and well-connected district, again, getting back to the walkability of both the east and the west. Maintaining safe, welcoming neighborhoods. This was also a couple of things to highlight here is that as the area starts to expand and sees some of these cultural influences, some of the participants really were looking forward to integrating with, one, the cleanup of the neighborhoods. Everybody recognizes that the blight needed to be cleaned up. The crime in the area, a lot of people recognized that crime needed to be addressed, but also integrating that with some of the policing efforts, the what do you call it, the beats that they have, they were very complimentary of the police officers and their presence, particularly along the light rail line that's in the west. And both the west and the east, one of the recommendations was to expand some of the multilingual capabilities of police department. And that was one that was really a highlight of what they wanted to discuss and felt it was important to them. Creating a live, work, play environment, also a goal, particularly around the rail stations, strategies to support that. And then in the east, particularly what we saw as one of the kind of, I wouldn't call it a main core because we really see the town center as the anchor for all of these redevelopment areas, but yet a supportive secondary core within the Main Street and Stapley intersection and that light rail stop associated with it. Reducing crime rates by more than 30%. It was noted by one of your other citizens, one of the speakers on the other plan, or proposals that crime was high in the west. That's true, but it really is. It's not throughout the whole plan. I want to clarify that there are some pockets that have higher than the city average, but generally, as you do get closer to downtown, those rates actually are at or below the current crime rates overall with the city. I thought I'd give you that clarification. Again, strategies on how to help reduce the crime rate. And then also code compliance, as I noted, was a big concern and people recognized needed to be addressed. And some of the strategies to help your neighborhood cleanup program achieve 90% compliance. Increasing home ownership rates. There was some comments that we received about the extensive rentals in the area, and they felt that more buy-in, and one of your residents again put it, his description of a neighborhood being like a tree, I thought was a good description, and so kind of expanding the roots, if you will, for the community. And next steps, finally, we are again wrapping up this second phase of the process, starting the public hearing process with yourself as well as the council. The council dates for adoption are coming up here in October. And then once that is adopted, then the plan is in place, we're done, and then we turn the tool over to the planning department as they seek to implement it. That's it. And I hope that wasn't too fast, and I hope that wasn't too long. Either way, I hope you, if you have any questions, though, I'm happy to answer any.
Much. Does anyone have any questions?
Can I just, so once this is done, say I'm a business owner in one of these areas, what do I do differently? How does this affect me differently than what's been happening in the past once these are adopted?
Well, right now, actually, in fact, I can turn it over to John and his staff as well to help support it. What really happens to an individual business owner, nothing changes overnight. Really, what this is a tool to allow the business owners to identify programs that they'd like to pursue to improve the area, and gives the city this as a tool to help the business owners and the residents really improve the area.
Can we use this as members of the Planning and Zoning Board to say, hey, this person is doing this thing here, this is a good idea, this is a bad idea? I mean, do we reference this document as sort of a mini general plan idea, or?
Chair, board member, there may be some opportunity for that. We've had the opportunity over the last year or so with the Southwest RDA, as development proposals have come in there, to look at anything that that particular plan suggests that we can use as part of an evaluation or recommendation. And it's really not set up that way, as Felipe pointed out. It's really kind of setting up and identifying tools to use in other ways. And I'd have to think a little bit too hard than I could right now to remember everything that's in this one to know if there is something there that could be used in this more proactive land use way. But there may be some things. Again, in the Southwest have been some things that kind of a little bit close. In particular, I'm thinking about a proposal we had for the intersection of Country Club and Southern, and kind of their design approach wasn't really quite some of the things that were suggested in the plan for the redevelopment of that corner. So we're able to kind of, suggest some things that work with that applicant to better implement some of those design goals. But it's really different than a land use plan.
So it's more on your level. This is more a staff direction.
It is, and Felipe mentioned turning it over to the planning department, and certainly there are some planning pieces to it, but it really hits a lot of departments. Economic development's going to have a big piece in it. Housing is going to have a big piece in it. Code compliance is going to have a piece in it. So a lot of different agencies will have the opportunity to look at it and further develop some of the tools that are in there, as well as just property owners saying, "Oh, here's a tool," such as some fundings or GPLITs or whatever to say they want to try to utilize.
Okay, thank you.
If I could add one thing on that, and you might be saying the same thing. Throughout the process, we had an economic or a redevelopment area advisory board, and we had members of the planning department, community services. We had some members of our economic development advisory board. We're also on that board member housing. Board member Crockett was a part of that for the East and West, and also for the Southwest. So that's one thing we were definitely trying to get was, collaboration between multiple organizations. We all kind of have the same goal.
I just wanted to follow up on a question I had earlier this afternoon, but in terms of diversity of ownership, would you say a word in terms of how that impacts, perhaps in a negative way, what you're trying to do in these redevelopment areas where you have a multiplicity of owners of property?
It really depends on the legal agreement that fractional ownership exists. And sometimes you have a situation where contractually no one can move without 100% agreement on redevelopment. That certainly hinders redevelopment, but it really is, it depends on each particular agreement, but that is one way in which it hinders development.
And then I guess,
I was just also going to add, that's one of the things that we've noticed, particularly in the Southwest area. If you look at Fiesta Mall, there's a number of owners there, and that's posed one of the challenges to redeveloping that particular area.
okay, and if I could, just one other question I had, which may be more of a question for Mr. Wesley, but so do these RDAs and these plans, do they give you any additional authority? I mean, when someone comes in to you with a project, does this give you any additional authority to say, no, you can't do this because it's not consistent with the plan for this RDA?
Chair, board member, again, I'd have to go back and look to see if there would be anything specific in this RDA. I don't recall anything in there. It gives us some suggestions for going in and looking at some of the tools we have, modifications potentially to the zoning code that will help facilitate development in the area, that type of thing. But I don't recall if there's anything in there. I don't know if you remember anything in there that would actually say that we shouldn't do a specific use.
No, the intent was really to be flexible and let staff use the regulatory documents they currently have in place, but use this as a guidance document to help encourage, again, that walkability and live, work, play environment.
So would it be fair to say this is more of a, for the P&Z department, this is more of a, here's what's possible out there. These are some of the things we've thought through and would like to encourage for this area, to give you some ideas in terms of where to push things as you see applicants come in?
Chair, board member, particularly in some of the target areas where they did give some suggestions on some land use options for the area, it does help in that regard with those. But mostly it is suggesting some tools for a variety of departments to use to help address redevelopment opportunities.
Thank you for that explanation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Board member Allen?
My question is, I understand the RDAs for the east and west. Did you guys take a look at the existing downtown redevelopment area and update that plan along the way as well? Or is it just specifically you were contracted only to do east and west?
Well, we were just contracted to do east and west, but I think probably more importantly, that already has an established RDA and a plan, and you would want to go back and actually look at that plan specifically, and that's not something that we did.
Okay, just because that was done in 1999 and
It was originally done in
it was done before that.
I'm trying to think of the proper way to address.
It was first done
Chair and
in
board member.
it was first done in the
Yes, it was first done in 1999. There are statutory requirements of when those need to be
Right.
revisited. And the most recent time that was revisited was in 2015. And the effort now before us is to look at all 4 of these redevelopment areas and the central business district as a whole, look at some of the goals and strategies offered in these 2 plans, as well as the Southwest that was done, in the last year or 2, and the town center, because there are a number of potential strategies that we can offer for all 4 RDAs simultaneously, and there are some things that we need to focus on in each of the 4 redevelopment areas. So after, plan adoption, that's the next phase, starting to look at how do we implement these, what makes sense within the budget. So that would be kind of the next phase, actually trying to make it happen.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Can I ask another one? So, the downtown one was done in 99? That's when that was adopted?
That was the most recent.
And then it was updated in 2015?
Correct.
And then the southern one was last year, and now we're doing the east and west, is that right?
The Southern was adopted in 2016.
Okay.
The findings of necessity, and then the plan was adopted last September 2017.
Okay. I'm curious, for the downtown one, do we have, is it working? Are we seeing that it's changing things? How are we, are there some okay, now they have this tool, so this thing's done. I might not be informed enough, but I don't hear a ton of oh, these great things are happening in downtown, but maybe I don't hear it because it doesn't, percolate up to where I am. But, in conversations I've had with people, a lot of businesses in downtown aren't doing especially better and are worried about this and that and the other thing. So, but this could just be that I haven't heard positive things. So I'm just curious, have we looked back at what we've learned and what's working, and do we have some concrete examples of, oh, this thing worked, this thing worked, this thing worked?
If I could interject, I spend more time downtown than I ever have. And I see more people spending time downtown than I ever have, more innovative businesses, homegrown businesses. I think it's going gangbusters. So I appreciate the efforts forward. I think this isn't necessarily the body to evaluate an RDA. I think it has more of an economic development emphasis. I hope that the tools presented and some of the federal funds that might open up because we have this in place would really be helpful. And I just wanted to call out your particular attention to some of those cultural districts. For you to go in and listen to neighbors and residents and actually honor the fact that we have Mekong District and we have heavily Hispanic neighborhoods is really important to that kind of economic development for particular areas that might have different needs or different cultural wants. So I just appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilmember Villanueva Sauceda, is that right? Okay, thank you, apologize, I'm tongue twisted here, but Board Member Boyle, to answer your question, I'll give you some anecdotal response, but for a more direct response as to the specifics, I'd defer to staff. But I think what you see happening in downtown is a direct result of a lot of things, and one of them is this RDA. The other is, of course, light rail. The other is the council's specific focus on the area for infrastructure. But the RDA definitely is a part of that revitalization that you've been seeing downtown.
Yes. Board member, I would agree with that. If you go on, we have an individual website for the 4 different RDAs and redevelopment areas as a whole. And there's some examples on that town center website, but there's probably about a dozen examples. Light rail is the principal example on there, but would agree with what's been said previously.
And No, I can give you, I mean, separately, not in this meeting, but I can specifically point out my experience in downtown redevelopment, about what tools we used on which project, so I can talk to you about that at a different time.
Does anyone have any other comments or questions? I guess not. Thank you very much for your hard work, and took a long time. We appreciate that. Thank you. All right, well, now, yeah, I think we have to do them separately too, right? Okay, so would anybody like to make a motion
You
on
ready?
these items?
Okay. I'd make a motion that we approve the Mesa East redevelopment area plan with staff recommendation of approval.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, please vote. All right, that item passes. Now we have a motion on the West redevelopment area plan.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'd be happy to make a motion on the Mesa West redevelopment plan that we approve this, and based on staff's recommendation and the presentation today.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'd second it.
Okay, all vote. That passes as well. Congratulations, on to the next and final step. All right, any other business, Mr. Wesley? Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I would make a motion, we adjourn.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, all in favor? I think, did someone say nay?
It's been a long time, I always wondered. I'm just really having a good time
You're
today.
gonna stay here all night, okay. Well, thank you very much.
I don't get to see that, right?